The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today for June 6th, 2019. I am your host, Neil Ruchlani, filling in for Dan Bespris. Per usual on Thursdays, but the downside is I have no guest, or no co-host, I should say, to help me along today. So it's just going to be me here on the show, and so that probably means it's going to be a shorter show since I tend to talk less than my co-hosts, just the nature of my personality, so we'll see how today goes. Before we get started, I do want to mention our show is presented by Hoop Ball and sponsored by Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee. You can find their tasty, wonderful, delicious products at hawaiianisles.com or on amazon.com. If you're a coffee drinker, please support them. Help support our show. All right, so today we are going to be talking about two different things. We're going to talk about, I'm going to be talking about two different things. I'll be talking about the NBA Finals. Game 3 concluded last night with Toronto winning comfortably against a depleted Golden State Warriors team. What are my thoughts on the line going forward, on the series going forward? Toronto's chances, Golden State's chances, and all that. And then secondly, we'll get into the Indiana Pacers season review. We'll do their team last season, go over some of their fantasy values for some of their key players. At least I tend to focus on top 150 players that were relevant for 12-team leagues, and then do a little bit of trying to, forecast where things might be next year given their current roster construction and thoughts of players' movement and perhaps players' development or regression. All right, with that said, I'm going to start back with the NBA Finals, Game 3. My thoughts, I picked Toronto. I'm going to say that, although I didn't publicly do it. I was talking with Dan on the show on Tuesday, and I'd said to him, at that point it was the game was Golden State Golden State -6. They were a 6-point favorite going into that game. I thought that was a little high given the uncertainty around Durant and Thompson. I believe on that show I said if Durant was out and that line stayed at 6, I'd probably take Toronto because I did not think Klay Thompson 2 days before the game started would be 100% even if he was playing. As everyone knows, he did not play, and without him, without Durant, with DeMarcus Cousins, who clearly is not the DeMarcus Cousins of old, at least not yet. We'll see if he ever fully recovers from that terrible injury last year. But right now, in the playoffs of 2019, he is not looking like someone who can really help them too much. Had a very poor performance last night, big differential plus minus, and then of course the box score stats were pretty anemic, so did not contribute there. So they were down to Steph, who of course was just such an entertaining game to watch from his perspective. This is the one thing I guess we get deprived of when we have super teams. The superstar can get buried. Not buried, but doesn't always have to play to their fullest, leaving it all out there on the court, game in, game night, as some superstars have to do in other markets. But Steph did last night, gave a performance, I'll just say cliche for the ages, and was not enough. But it was still fantastic to watch from a basketball perspective. He is just remarkable out there. It seems like he can get his shot, or at least get a shot, whenever he wants. And, of course, he can knock down from basically anywhere on the court. So it's just such a thing of beauty. I love watching point guards that have great handle and great ability to hit long-range jumpers, which, of course, he fits. So, great game from him. Draymond played solidly. Had to fill up more in the scoring than I think they would like to have had, and did some nice things on the offensive end as well as the defensive end. Got some really nice charges, some really nice stops right at the rim, some nice steals there. So played very well as well, but did not lead to a victory for the Warriors. So then this gets me back to, what's my thought going into Game 4? I will back just before I get to that. I should probably mention Toronto. Toronto, great night from Marc Gasol, Kawhi Leonard, Danny Green, of course, Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry. The entire team contributed. They looked much better than they did in Game 2. They got a lot more assists. They're a very good passing team. They're not a great passing team like the Warriors typically are, but they are a very good passing team. And that showed last night with a lot more assists coming off their made shots. They made a lot of, obviously, three-point shots. They shot much better last night, which probably wasn't, I don't know if it was the difference, but a difference. And they looked like they were playing free out there, which was, I think, the big difference for me between Game 2 and Game 3 from Toronto side. Game 2, they looked a little tight. They looked like they forced shots. They looked like there was more one-on-one sort of hero ball at the end by players just trying to make plays, taking their guy and finding a way to score, which did happen last night. Will Siakam, as well as he played last night, I thought there were a couple possessions where he did that, which I don't think is going to serve them well. I think if they continue to move the ball and they continue to make plays for each other, not just try to drive and then finish, maybe drive and then kick, or drive and then find someone cutting, they're going to be just fine, I think, the rest of the series. If Golden State is never fully healthy. So that kind of comes back to the big if. What do I think about Golden State? When I look at last night, I'm very tempted to say that Clay could have played in emergency, but this is really conspiracy theory. So this is all based on conjecture, I should say. I don't take this as any inside information. But I think knowing that Durant was not going to be out there, I think Kerr and the staff thought, why push Clay? Because one more aggregation to that hamstring and he could be done for the entire series. So we already know Looney's gone, who, if you look at some of the, actually look at some of the numbers, Looney might be as important as anyone else out there. So as strange as that might sound, from a numbers perspective on the season, he seems to have a bigger impact just quantitatively. So given that Looney's gone, we now are stuck with a front court where it's going to be a Cousins and a Bogut, and then Jordan Bell may be in desperation, but certainly nothing that can match with Toronto's front court. So the back court in the wing positions are going to be crucial for Golden State. They have maybe a very rusty Durant, and who knows. I can't imagine that he is going to just step back out there and be the Kevin Durant we're expecting to see. I think he can step back out there and play at a pretty high level, since he is one of the greatest players in the world. But I don't think it's going to be an MVP like Durant type performance. I think it's going to be, I don't know what the right word is to say, like percentage wise, but I don't think it's going to be a high level Kevin Durant. And I don't think it's going to be a high level Klay Thompson. I don't think they're going to go out there and score in the high 20s, is what I'm saying. And Klay Thompson, known for his perimeter defense, that could be hampered as well. And then Durant, obviously a solid defender, could be struggling a bit out there on that side as well. Struggling from his ability, not from a average NBA ability. So we'll look at this line as of next game. We've got Golden State -5.5. That makes sense given that Golden State just lost. When teams lose in the finals, typically the next game there's an expectation of a bounce back. There's also an expectation that guys will play. I think Durant, they said, was questionable for this past game, but I think probable or at least out there a little bit. I think we would expect, if not him, then at least Clay. So they will have more firepower. They are the team coming off the loss. They are the more desperate team needing to win this game. So the 5.5 point line seems reasonable to me. Toronto shot very well yesterday. Golden State did not. So adding on an extra point to Golden State seems okay to me based on what the prior line was. I believe it closed around 4.5. Maybe it came down to 3.5 at game time when all the news came out. But it was basically 4.5 for most of the day. So I think this is pretty fair. I don't think I'm going to touch it. I think I am going to wait and see if you do in-game betting. That's where it might go. Looking at how Durant and Thompson look on the court, maybe after a quarter and a half. I also worry about their stamina. So even if they're looking pretty good in the first quarter, I might go on the assumption that by fourth quarter time, they'll slow down. I'm more interested also, or not more interested, I'm also very interested in see how Toronto plays early on, how their intensity is, how their ball movement is. I'm more concerned with that, what types of shots they're taking, rather than whether the shots are falling early on. And, of course, how they're matching up against Clay and Durant, assuming they're both out there. So I will probably do in-game. If I had to pick something now, no, actually I'm not going to because that doesn't make sense. It just would be a coin flip at this point. So going to hold off on that, but my heart is on the Raptors, so I'll be rooting for them regardless of where I bet. That's one thing I actually don't mind. I don't mind rooting against I won't say rooting against my bet, but my bet is just what I think might happen. My heart is what I kind of want to happen, so I can kind of separate those a little bit. So anyway, that is my finals take. I'm sure there are about a million more out there, so get some other opinions if you're going to make a wager before you do so. And with that, I am going to move on to the Indiana Pacers. This is actually a pretty fantasy-rich team last year, which I think was kind of surprising, both in terms of their performance on the court. I should say surprising in the sense that both how they played last year, finishing pretty strong, given the fact that Oladipo only played around 49 games. 36 games, ended up 49th on a per-game basis, ranking-wise. They played very well. They had a very good coach. They had, on a per-game basis, they actually had 6 guys fantasy relevant. Oladipo, I'm counting in that, which I probably shouldn't. But take him out, still 5 guys fantasy relevant, which is a pretty fantasy-rich team. Let's just go through some of these rankings here. And then, I'll go through each one, and then I'll kind of think of what's going to happen next year. So Miles Turner was their highest ranked player. I'm looking at ACAT. I'll look at their total and their per game value. On a per game value, he was 39th overall. Overall, on a total value, he was 35th. So he kind of had that bounce back year. Not the second round value that many people had hoped, but he did kind of hold that late third round, early fourth round value, which is pretty solid. Played 78 games, played close to 29 minutes a game, scored 13 points on 10.5 field goal attempts, just under 50% shooting. Shot 73% from the free throw line, which hurt him a little bit. Only had 2 3/4 attempt a game, so not that many attempts. Had a 3-pointer, had 7.2 rebounds, 1.6 assists, 0.8 steals, but the big number that we love there is a 2.6 block. So, pardon me. Notifications. I have no idea how to turn these things off. Anyway, so Miles Turner, he is signed. He'll be playing with the team next year. He is a big part of this team's future. So what do we think in terms of fantasy value? Obviously, very safe player to draft next year. Will he return this 39 value? Where will he be ranked higher? My suspicion is he is going to be ranked higher. the 39th, which I'll have to see how high it is. But I think, looking at the categories, I think there are a little bit of some room for improvement. We know he's not a dominant rebounder, so don't expect that to go up. But I think it can hold. I think the assists might get even better. He's not a bad passer, so the 1.6 assists could get a tiny bit higher. The blocks at 2.6 probably can't get much better, but again, I don't think they'll fall too much. Maybe 2.5 is what I'll predict. The field goal percent is pretty solid. He's a very good shooter, pure shooter, and that's why I think the 3-pointers could go up. He could go up to 1.2 a little bit. I think his field goal percent could stay though. And then the free throw percentage, I think he can get better at the line. So only because he is such a great outside shooter. And guys that are great outside shooters tend to be better free throw shooters than this. Free throw shooting, of course, is a mental thing, but I think he will. He's one of those guys that I think that can improve. Maybe not drastically, maybe not 80% free throw shooter, but I think 75, 76% could be reasonable. I think he's going to have to work on that part of his game, as he will be someone who'll be sent to the line more and more throughout his career. So I'm hoping that he focuses on that and can improve that line. And because of that, I think he will be someone who I will rank somewhere in the 30s, I think, next season. Not sure exactly. Well, obviously, we'll have some turnover on this team as we get to here momentarily, but and we don't know who's going to come in. But I think that's just my first look at it, where I think Turner would be ranked in an 8-category league. All right, their second player, I'm going to jump to Oladipo, even though he was out for basically 2/3 of the season. Did play 36 games. 205 overall value, so not fantasy worthy, but the per game basis 49, which is probably even more significant. He was drafted in many leagues as a second rounder based off his prior season. So even when he played those 36 games, he was right around 50th. So he may be a bounce back candidate, although I think the expectations of that bounce back may exceed his actuality. In those 36 games, he played 32 minutes, 18.8 points on 16 field goal attempts, just off 42% last year, which is part of the reason he dropped the 73% from the line on 4 attempts. The steals were 1.7, which are obviously solid, but not as high as they were before. His blocks were down to 0.3. Those two categories seem more in line with what I expect going forward. Those two defensive stats. The assists at 5.2, I think that is reasonable as well. Rebounds 5.6, 3-pointers 2.1, could jump up a bit, maybe to 2.25. And the points, maybe those go up a bit, maybe gets up to 20, scores in the 20 next season. So I do see a slight little bump in Oladipo's per game value from this year. 49, I think, was a little low. I think he gets, like Turner, I'm probably going to value him somewhere in the 30s. But I think he's going to be someone drafted in the second or third round. Well, I don't know. We'll see what the rankings are. Obviously, people tend to draft all the rankings. We'll see if he's another height candidate. But my first take is he will be somewhere very close to Turner. I'll have him ranked probably in the mid-30s again. But that's just, of course, first take. We'll have to see how this roster construction plays out. And, of course, his health coming into next season. Looking at the next player I have here is Thaddeus Young. We're now starting to get into some players that will not, well, I shouldn't say will not, are not currently signed. So we do not know if they'll be on this team next year or not. Thaddeus Young is one of them. Had a solid year last year. He continued his great playing for them, playing off, and also over 30 minutes a game. 70th on a per game basis in 8 category leagues, 54th total in 8 category leagues. That is, I think, a great outperformance from his draft position. Very solid across the board. 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, 0.63. So a little low there, though. Did have 2.6 assists, 1.6 steals, 0.5 blocks, 52% shooting, which is a big boon to his value. And then, as always, he struggles on the free throw line, just 64% on 1.67 attempts. We'll see if they keep that Young. I think if they keep him, I think these stats are a little inflated from next year, assuming he comes back here. I think He will play. He will play. He always played in every single game, which helped him. But let's go back to his per game value. So 70th. I think that's a more fair metric. I think his minutes will go down, and that's kind of why I think his value will go down a little bit from next year. Currently at 30.8 minutes this past season, I think he slips into the high 20s. So I think every category goes down. His free throw percentage won't get better. It's just, it is what it is with him. His field goal percentage might dip a bit too. The 52% is going to be hard for him to sustain. It won't. I don't think it'll drag too much, but I think 48, 47, 49% is kind of where I expect him. So then the other categories will just take a slight drop, given his minutes go down, which is my expectation. So I'd probably rank him right now, probably closer to 100 going into next season, assuming he's on this roster. So that's my thoughts on him. Darren Collison, last year, another player who I do not believe is currently signed for next season as of now. So his per game rank was 81st in 8-category league, 68th on totals. Played 80 games, played 28 minutes. Really saw an increased usage because of the absence of Oladipo. Not going to go through his stat set because I believe he will be the big sufferer of fantasy value because of assuming Oladipo's back and healthy and assume Collison resigns. So I am not actually going to touch Collison next season. Played 28 minutes this past season. Even with the absence of Oladipo, I think they've got Aaron Holiday, who will be a deeper league guy off the bench, who may supplant him in a secondary role there. And his minutes, Aaron Holiday minutes, that is, may ramp up a bit. And I think Collison's are going to drop. So I think Collison's going to play more like 24 minutes next season. So unless, of course, injuries occur again. So that would change things. But all things being equal, I think Darren Collison is looking for a decrease in minutes, and I don't think he's going to be top 125 relevant next year. That is my first take on him. These are all subject to change, by the way. But so anyway, let's go on to, okay, then we have basically two more players I want to talk about here before we wrap it up. Bogdanovich, monster season, 2 3-pointers a game, 18 points, 32 minutes, rock out there. The defensive stats are kind of the only thing that keeps him down. 0.9 steals, virtually no blocks. 49% from the floor, 80% from the free throw line. This guy is solid going into next season. 86 overall per game rank. I keep screwing this up. 62nd total rank, 8-category leagues. Played 85 games. The 86 rank, I think, is very fair. He doesn't really have a lot of name recognition just yet. I think he will slide into the later rounds. Sort of that no man's land. He is someone I'll rank probably very similar to where he was this year. I think he is, assuming again he is signed and they want him as part of the team, I think that ranking can hold. All right, and finally, I'm going to talk about Domantas Sabonis. Great year off the bench, 25 minutes, 13.8 points, 9.3 rebounds. Great passer, 2.9 assists. The defensive stats were a little weak, 0.7 steals, 0.4 blocks. Shot 58% from the field, 71% from the free throw line. Just 0.1 threes a game. So he will be okay next year. I do not think he's going to be a huge breakout candidate unless we see a role change, which I don't think is going to happen. I think this 25 minutes might be where he is again next year. I think these stats are pretty much going to hold. Maybe the defensive stats get better. I don't see the assists going up. They're 2.9. The rebounds, 9.3. Seem pretty safe. The 0.1 threes, unless he develops an outside shot, so keep an eye on him in the offseason. And then the 13.8 points seem reasonable as well. So I think this 90th value, somewhere he can hold. Hopefully he can be drafted later than that and provide value on your team next season. And I know I kind of rushed that, but like I said, I like having someone here to help me out, hold my hand through these podcasts. So anyway, that's my take on the Indiana Pacers. A little quick look on their team from last season and where I think they Preliminarily might do next season. We'll be doing, in addition to this review of each team, we'll be doing previews of each team once we get past, once we do all of these, and then of course we pass the NBA draft, we pass the free agency period, and all those signings, so we'll know exactly how these rosters are constructed going into next season. So we can do much more. I should say, I wouldn't say accurate forecast, but at least forecast based on much more knowledge of teams' constructions. So that should help. So anyway, thanks for listening. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, I am at ballwithneil, BALLWITHNEIL. Thanks again to our sponsors, Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee. Again, you can find them at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee, or that's HI Kona Coffee, I believe. Or actually, I don't know. I think it's Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee. And but I do know you can find them at Amazon.com. And Adrian Benjamins and Coach will be on tomorrow. And so I'll be on again next week with Dan. Thanks for listening, and take care.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.